All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jason Flame, and here we are, Master Motivation on a Friday. Today, we have a very special guest, someone that I have been wanting to have on this show for a really long time, someone that I've been following on social media and just love what he posts and what he talks about. And his name is Matt Lisle. Matt Lisle has coached for over 2 decades with experience coaching at every level in both baseball and softball, everything from little league to the major leagues. His wider work as Coach Lisle moves beyond any one sport, speaking regularly and memorably into the lives and realities of youth and student athletes, along with parents and coaches at all levels of their game. As Coach Lisle, Matt has gathered over 1 million followers on social media where he consistently uses his voice to help others find meaning and experience joy in all levels of sports. Whether through his books, live workshops, or digital experiences, he speaks with undeniable passion and unparalleled experience to crowds large and small about the unique challenges and opportunities sports provide athletes, parents, and coaches. More than any professional credentials, Matt is proudest of his work with his family. When Matt's not coach on the field, he's dad to his 5 kids. He calls the Bay Area home, and though it's way too expensive, the weather is perfect for a pickup game with family and friends all year long. Thank you, Matt, for being on the show.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
This is just it's one of those times where I think I'm approaching about 100 interviews, and every one of them I get some goosebumps because I get excited about what we're talking about. I mean, first thing was I told you that I'm a huge fan and been following you for quite a while. Love your posts, but then as I started reading more, learned that you love Star Wars and you love Elvis, which two of my great loves as well. So if you could start really quick, I know I read a lot of the bio, but could you just introduce yourself in a little bit more detail? Tell us about your background. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, so I grew up the oldest of 7 kids, all playing sports and very competitive family that still is very competitive. And I went to high school in the Bay Area, and I got into coaching really young. I think I was 24 years old when I was my first head varsity baseball coach. And through that experience of that first year, I realized, wow, I thought I really knew a lot about the game, and I knew nothing. And I knew nothing about teaching and nothing about coaching. But my grandfather coached college football for about 25 years. My dad coached me for a long time, so there was a little spark there to just I wanted to get better at it, and I realized I wasn't very good, and this kind of passion burned into me to become a better coach. And so I've been on that journey for about 25 years now, and I feel like every year I try to get a little bit better at what I'm doing. And I think at the beginning of my career, it was very X's and O's and trying to get better at the game. And now, as an older coach, my focus is more on empathy and learning how to coach people better. So I've coached a long time. I grew up coaching high school, like I said, then I got to be able to coach college. And thanks to social media, it opened a lot of doors for me to be able to coach professional baseball and Division I baseball and softball. So that's kind of the short of it. But I've been very fortunate and very lucky in my journey to just kind of continually just try to do a little bit better job every day, every year.
hmm and you obviously played sports growing up as a kid. You played baseball. What other sports did you play? You talked about your dad coaching you as a kid. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I played. I think, and I hate to say, like, we grew up in this different generation, but where I grew up in the cul-de-sac and we in the neighborhood that we grew up in, every day after school, from roller hockey to flag football, we played everything every day till it got dark, every single day, all day. And so for me, I lettered in 4 sports in high school. I played baseball, football, basketball, and track. And so I loved all of it. And it's funny, I know you're martial arts, and for me, it's funny because like every other 7-year-old in the country at the time, I fell in love with the Karate Kid. I wanted to be the Karate Kid so bad. And I had a lot of friends that did martial arts. I always wanted to do it, and I was really into boxing. My grandfather was a boxer, and in the kind of the golden age of boxing, the 80s and 90s, and boxing was on television all the time, late night. So Sugar Ray Leonard, and so I really, really was passionate, excited about boxing and karate, and I had a good friend who was one of the best Kenpo guys in the state in high school, but I never have once taken a class or anything. And now as I've gotten older, people ask me like different about regrets in life, and it's like, man, I really wish I had gotten into boxing when I said I was going to, or into karate when I said I was going to, and just never did. But yeah,
Well,
so as a kid,
I know some great schools up in the Bay Area. So if you're ever looking for a school to go check it out, let me know.
what's funny is, like I said, I'm that guy who's done all the research. I know all the best. I know the best boxing schools and everything. And there's so many around here.
Oh yeah.
It's just a matter of like, oh man, trying to find the time priority to do that. But
Yep.
it's been on my list for a long time.
Absolutely. Well, as we're kicking off this interview here, guys, some of you are watching live, and some of you may watch this later. But if you're watching live and you have any questions that you'd like to ask Matt, please post those in the comments, and we'll see if we can get to those before the end of the time. But so you did four sports. How did you manage your time as a kid to letter in four sports? And I'm assuming do well in school and go on to college.
Yeah, so for me, I was really lucky that school was very easy for me in a sense. I could do bare minimum effort in high school and pass and do okay. And so for me, in high school, I mean, like I said, sports was everything to me growing up, and so that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be a professional baseball player, and so when high school came around and I had some success there, it just that kind of just consumed me. And then my sophomore year of high school, I had a 1.83 GPA going into the basketball playoffs, and I missed the playoffs because I didn't make grades, and that was kind of a wake up call for me, and never happened again. My parents made sure of that too. But for me, I mean, I was devastated to have missed that, and kind of finally woke up like, oh, this is an important piece of it. And so, I just think we were again fortunate that in the '90s, without social media and as much internet as we had and all these things, in high school, the distractions we had were, girls, and we had school and sports, and the a lot of things that kids have today. A lot of the distractions, we didn't have them as
Hmm.
much. At least I didn't.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. We could talk all about the differences in, back in the day. But one thing I do want to talk about back in the day is the way your dad coached you and the way that you were raised, because, something that I read stuck with me a little bit and resonates with me as a young coach. I was not very good at being empathetic to my students and to the families and really looking at them as a person versus as a player, because when you show up to class or you show up to training, you show up to work out, we want the absolute best, and our method was a lot of hardcore, telling them what's wrong more than telling them what's right, thinking more about their performance than about how their mindset. So talk a little bit about that, kind of difference in personalities of coaching.
Yeah, so if you were to describe my grandfather as a coach and my dad, and as a person and coach, they are very, very funny people, but they are very straight faced, dry humor, and very sarcastic. So, and then and I would say that's how I am wired as well. So and that's how they coached me. That's how my dad coached me. A lot of sarcasm. And then I realized getting into coaching, for the first 5 to 10 years. I mean, that's how I was. And I ended up coaching softball, division college softball for a little bit. And I had a player tell me like halfway through the season that she had gone home and cried every other day because of me. And
Mhm.
that I was so mean and to me, and I think my mind was like, I don't, I mean, I feel like I've never said anything that mean, and it was just again like to me lighthearted sarcasm that was taken very personally, and just through I said growing up and trying to become a better coach and learning, I learned that sarcasm. Again, for us growing up, it was funny, and for a lot of kids and people in general, it's not. So that was a big shift for me about 10 years ago to go, okay, let's look at my approach to this thing, and even though I'm not the yelling, screaming, angry type,
Mhm.
I would use sarcasm to vent my frustrations with a drill or a dumb question or whatever it is, and through that and through now, just learning that wasn't a good style for me. That has really helped me a lot.
hmm And if we have any coaches that are watching, especially young coaches coming up, or also experienced coaches that are watching, and they struggle with that, because I know from myself, right? Sometimes I'll be watching a kid do their form, and I'll ask them sarcastically, "Is that the best you got?" Or is that your best front stance? Or come on, I know you got just that tone. How would you how would you explain that to a coach in how they can change that mindset of what they should be thinking about as they're making that criticism or as they're making that critique?
I just think as coaches, it's funny because I always use this example. We have a drill in baseball. This drill called the star drill, where these players throw the ball, and I give them I used to give them the instruction: if you want the ball, say ball, and the person will throw it to you. And so the only instruction really that you have is say ball. And so I would say for most of my career, when we did that drill, if guys weren't saying ball, I would be like yelling at them, "Come on!" And it's like, "Come on, guys! I told you to say ball. Come on!" And then all of a sudden, the shift that I made one day was after a few minutes, no one was saying ball. Then someone did, and I'm like, "Hey, Jimmy, great job calling ball. John, great job calling ball." Next thing you know, the entire team is yelling ball. So for me, it was like just by not harping on them and saying what they weren't doing well and praising those who did. It's funny, coaches forget that, oh, you know what, everybody else wants that praise too, and when they
Hmm.
see you praising that person for what they're doing. So for me, I always try to find a way to point out what they're doing really well and say, hey, great job doing that, and
Hmm.
others around them seeing that on a one-on-one basis. Usually it's just coming alongside them and saying, hey, I've seen you do this really, really well. Right now, I don't see you doing that well. Sometimes just asking questions. Why do you think that is? At a practice not too long ago, I asked players, why do you? I always try to ask them, today I didn't look like your best effort. Instead of me telling them all the reasons why their effort wasn't good, just asking, hey, why do you guys think today's effort wasn't very good? And guys are like, hey, we're really tired. We had weights today. It's really hot out. Like, whether they're excuses or not in their head, those are the reasons why they failed in this thing. And so,
Hmm.
at least trying to identify it and saying, hey, I hear you. I understand those things. But that's part of being mentally tough. We've got to be able to handle those environments. So a lot of times it's kind of just asking them like, hey, I've seen you do this thing. I know you do it really well. You're not doing it well right now. Like, how do we? What's going on? And just trying
Hmm.
to explore it a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And also before how you said, highlighting the players or the students that are doing a great job, because you're right. Everybody loves that praise. Everybody wants to hear their name or hear that they did something well. And when we call that out, now the next person is craving for that. So that breeds that, positivity. Do you still find yourself, with that sarcastic tone, in practice? Do you feel it's still
Oh,
hard
I
even to this
mean,
day?
I can think of not time a couple months ago where I sent the entire team thread the practice schedule. Then a couple hours later, I adjusted it and sent a new one, screenshot of the practice schedule. I told them that I would put the practice schedule up by the dugout, and so you have all these stop gaps of like where you are.
Right.
Getting into practice or getting to our hitting groups, and someone says to me, "Hey, coach, what am I in the same hitting group as I was yesterday, or am I in a different one?" And like, my brain wants to explode because I literally want to just say, like, how is it possible that I sent you 2 text messages today? We mentioned it again before practice. I said to go look up on the board. We've got to this point, and somehow you did not. So for me, like, it's funny because I recognize it, like I don't know if it's my blood pressure or whatever it is. I can recognize that, like, right then and there, I want to say something, just blow them up, like, and so for me, um, I think I've just done a better job of catching myself beforehand. So, like I said, it's automatic. Like, it's instinct to me to just want to be like, how is it possible? Instead of saying, okay, hey, and then but I will say, hey, this morning I sent this text messages. I talked about this on the board. Like, where was the disconnect? And so trying to, talk it out a little bit better, just maybe a little bit softer way than, again, like, so for me, I definitely notice when usually it's in the, I guess you call the dumb question category, where I've communicated something really clearly. And so, but I'll tell you, I can think of one of the last practices we had. I explained this drill. guys weren't doing it correctly. Something happened, and so I brought them together. And I know it's easy to do it in a sarcastic tone, but I said, "Hey guys, we're not doing this drill correctly. Did I do a poor job of communicating what we were doing?" And trying to be sincere with that. Really, it's like, okay,
Hmm.
so maybe it was me, and that's all. I'll tell our athletes, hey, we're not doing this drill correctly. Did I not communicate it correctly, or did I say something? And like, so a lot of times, they're like, no, coach, that was on us. We didn't do it, and they go back and do it correctly. Or sometimes they could say, hey, yeah, coach, we were really confused with that. And, even if they should have clarified that before going to do the thing, I think it's important to let them be able to explain why. And for me, as a coaching rule that I have a rule with all of my athletes, and I tell them very clearly, is that you can always call BS with me. You can always call BS. And what that means is, not in the drill and having some feel on what's going on in this scenario, but if I say something that's really confusing or it doesn't line up with what your philosophy is or anything like that, at some point you've got to come to me and say, "Hey, coach, my dad told me to do it this way. My other coach told me to do it this way,
Hmm.
or I don't understand why you want me to do it this way." To me, adding that caveat to my coaching over the last few years has really helped, because I think you get a lot of kids, athletes in general, who just like, "Yes, coach," and they nod their head and they walk
Hmm.
away. And they do it their own way, or they do it. They're like, I don't want to do what coach says, or I don't like that
Hmm.
thing. For me, letting them call BS in a sense, or letting them to be able to come to me and talk about it. I feel like we've gotten through a lot of things. It's like, oh, it's just the terminology was different, or you were understanding it different. And now we're on the same page, and we're moving forward. That's been really helpful to me as well.
Yeah, I find it a little funny and almost comforting at the same time that you talk about the fact that you've given them all the information, and I can't tell you how many times I've put a sign on the door or made announcements or gone over the information, and then there's always someone that missed it. But what you followed up with was something that I think is important, is that you asked, and whether it's sarcastic or not, did I do a good job of communicating that? And I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've learned, over the last several years for myself as an instructor, as a teacher, as a leader, is, am I communicating? Because I might be thinking that I'm communicating well, but
Correct.
if the people that are attempting to receive the information aren't getting it, maybe I'm not doing a good job of communicating. And it's always okay to ask. And I deal with a lot of really young children, but I also deal with their parents, whereas you deal with adult players that can be accountable for themselves. But I think that that's great, because you ask them, "Hey, did I communicate it?" And they said, "Yes, that's on us." Well, that's an immediate accountability factor right there for them to accept that and say, "Hey, okay, and let's communicate it and move on together." So I think that makes a really good relationship, because that's really a key in your relationship with your players and your parents and your families, is if that communication is tight and we're on the same page, we can move together. Because I can't tell you how many times, when I was coaching travel teams and this and that, communication would be the biggest missing link, and people would just be super frustrated.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, so talking about the sarcastic and the humor, came across a couple videos of some dad jokes. You did
Ha!
a video on some dad jokes. You got any good ones for us today?
It's funny because I am the it's funny, over the years, coaches, my athletes have always drive them crazy with mostly just puns. And for me, it's really horrible puns. But I have my youngest brother has made dad jokes into a living, and he has, I think, 4 million followers on social media, and makes a good living doing dad jokes. And so it's just funny to me, because again, like, in our family, and with my coaching, so not really. I think one of my favorite ones that I've used recently is that. I tell people, a man came to my door asking for a donation for the local pool. So I gave him a glass of water. Uh, and so, just, for me, I think when it came to practice throughout the years, um, I realized that I love to have fun, and I love it to keep it light. And so, if you were to ask my players, even at the college level, professional level, if you were to ask them, what's Coach Lisle like at practice, they would say he jokes around too much, a lot of dumb dad jokes, and he dances horribly to music. And so, for me, it's easier with older kids, older athletes, in the sense of being able to find the balance between joking around too much and being focused on what we're doing. But my athletes has to get to know me, learn that I'm extremely demanding. Like my expectations of what I expect you to be able to do. If I give you an instruction, if I teach you how to do something, like I expect you to do that really well. On the other side of that coin, like we're gonna have a lot of fun doing this, because especially at the college level where we're just grinding 40 hours a week, and you're just like it could be miserable. So for me, I try to make it as fun and joking and music and as much as we can, to make sure that they understand that we don't do this just because we need to do it. We do this because we actually love it. We do it because it's fun, and the sports and activities like athletics should be very fun things. And I think it's hard for coaches to find that balance, but I feel pretty good about over the years learning how to do that the right way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I think that culture of what your practice and what your training is like, and again, it all comes back to the relationship. When there's that bond, they want to play harder for you. They want to follow along. They want to take the advice. So, finding that balance, and the balance with every team is going to be different because every player is different. Every group of players that you're working with are going to be different. I have several friends that are kind of getting their podcast started, or they're on social media, and I mean, you've obviously done a phenomenal job. What do you think the keys to your success have been as far as getting such an amazing following? I mean, million followers, a million views, YouTube, Twitter, everywhere. What's your biggest advice on that?
For me, when I first just decided to do that in 2012, I read a Gary V book called Jab, 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 Right Hook, and the book was about just in business in general, just continually providing value as much as you can, giving away as much information as you can, providing value to people, so that when you ask them to buy something or do something, they do it. And so for me, in 2012, I said, you know what? I really think the social media thing is going to be big in business and for stuff like that. And so I literally was 8 to 12 hours a day crafting posts, sharing information, advice, and tips. And again, I'm talking 8 to 12 hours a day of, like, again, writing, figuring out videos, and posting things on Facebook and Twitter. Instagram wasn't even around then, but and so just going after it really hard and trying to provide value, not trying to sell anything at all, nothing, no
Hmm.
slant of marketing. And so I really, really dug into that, and it just kind of snowballed. And with social media, the kind of the fun part of it is that as you get some momentum and as you're consistent over and over and over again, that eventually, something does kind of hit, or goes viral, or it has some success, and then like the following starts going. So, my advice probably is not any different than anybody else, in the sense of just being very consistent. And I think part of it's got to be out of your comfort zone. To me, TikTok, it was really difficult for me to figure out how do I provide value there? How do I speak in that platform? And I've gotten better at it. So my advice is kind of just stepping out a little bit further into those things, and then trying to get into the conversation. I I hate Twitter in a lot of ways, because just the stuff that goes on there is the dumpster fire of arguments and things like that. But if I was starting out now in my field, I would very much follow the leaders in that industry, and whenever they're posting questions or in the conversation, doing it in the right way,
Hmm.
not dropping here's my podcast link and listen to it, but actually being a part of the conversation, establishing myself as an expert as well. That you start seeing that people, I think about someone like Gary Vee. I've been fortunate enough that he follows me, and I've been able to have some conversations with him over the years. But I would say that for most people, like, you don't have access to Gary Vee, and so, but there are people in the conversation on his social media, on his Instagram and things like that, that are also experts. And so there's this ability to have conversation with these other people. And so I think just like in real life, networking and building your friends and stuff like that, social media can be used the same way. And so, but I think that the problem I come across a lot of my friends who are trying to do the same thing is that they do it for a few weeks. They're consistent. Stuff happens. They fall behind. Okay, well, it's not having success. I'm gonna try this thing. And again, for me, there was a time that my to do list in the morning was like, 4 Facebook posts, 3 Twitter, and so I just made sure that no matter what, I got through that
Hmm.
list, no matter what happened. And to me, that was a big part of it.
And this, of course, is all in addition to your full-time job in the beginning, right? So you're putting in 8 to 12 hours, and you're doing all your own social media, your own video, your own everything was on you. When did you see the big shift? You started in 2012. When did you see that following really start to get a hold and connect?
It's funny because, and I hate to throw my friends and family members under the bus, but um, that first year, I can tell you, I have a circle of friends. That, we call it the thread in a sense. Guys text message each other, and I would say every other day, be like, oh, another dumb Coach Lisle quote on my Twitter feed or Facebook, and some of my family members are like, dude, what are you doing posting these motivational quotes every day? It's like, oh, it's so annoying. And I can't even explain. I can't remember it very often. But the next thing you know is like I had 10,000 followers, and it just kept going. Next thing you know, I had 100,000 followers after the first year. And again, just being consistent. And then once that happened, I think for me, again, like, once you start snowballing, it just going really well. And so having some viral posts here and there every once in a while would happen.
Hmm.
But for me, it was really, I just noticed that there was a payoff of being so consistent and posting
Hmm.
every day and working on it, that kind of getting a little bit of payday every day, in the sense of like, hey, this is, we got a few more hundred likes this time. And
Hmm.
um, I tried, for me, even to this day, I try to engage with as many comments as I can to people when they ask questions. It's more difficult nowadays, but I would, if someone left a comment on my post, I'm definitely going to respond to them and try to do that. So especially starting out.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I appreciate it so much, because this is how this interview happened, was that I happened to comment on something, or I posted on something, and you responded, and I was like, whoa, he responded. That's pretty darn cool. My wife just commented, and she's watching right now. She just said thanks for the post, and she shared and reposted dozens of times. We both do. Love your
I
posts.
appreciate that. Thank you.
So before I ask you, just the last couple questions, which are just some really fun questions, but talking to players really quickly, especially my son Mason, who might be watching or watching later, as an athlete, what is the most important thing for you as a coach to see from them?
I have to see that they are self motivated to accomplish whatever that goal or task or dream is. It cannot be parent motivated. And to me, I tell athletes all the time that I think it's easy at the higher the level you go, to trust the process. Coach says, so you know what, if you do all these things, this is going to happen. Okay, coach, and athletes trust it enough until trust is broken or something. But to me, I have to see the athletes love the process, and what that means is that they love doing the boring stuff. And I have to imagine in martial arts and karate and everything else that there's times that you're doing a series of drills that are boring. They're not very fun to do. And so my kids, I can tell them, my son, my 10-year-old son, he doesn't want to do a lot of practice that's not fun. And to me, we have a lot of conversations around like, hey, I understand that, but you also are complaining about not being one of the better players on the team, or these things. And then I said, just so you know, that's what it takes to do that. And so I think for athletes, even the young ones, they've got to take a little bit of ownership of their stuff. And if they really say, hey, dad, I want to play in college, or I just tell them, hey, just so you know, this is what it takes. And this is what the path is. And
Hmm.
so, and it's really hard. So, do you really want to do that? And so making sure that it's athlete driven, not parent driven.
I think that's a phenomenal bit of advice, because I've had these conversations not only with my own son, but with my students, and the fact that you're saying that it can't be parent driven. That's really important for them to understand that it's got to come from within themselves, and also the fact that things aren't always going to be fun. I can I man, I could tell you stories about every time my son would say that it's just not fun, and we would have the conversation of, it doesn't always have to be fun. It has to be fun in some respect, that we want to come back, but at the same time, the fun is in the learning, the fun is in the growth, the fun is in the game sometimes too. But you got to go through the basics, and you got to go through some of the quote unquote boring stuff to get to that. So
Yeah.
really,
And the
really
hard
sound advice.
and the hard part is that a lot of times, for example, I was talking to a college team not too long ago that had just won the championship the year before, and you got a bunch of freshmen in as well, and so when you in the process of practice, when it's miserable and tough and not fun and all these things, I talked to them a lot about this group of guys who came back, won the championship last year, like that feeling of dogpiling on the field and that joy that they experienced,
Mm,
they can remember that, and they can remember all the hard work that they put in, and so that payday of joy was worth it. And so I talking to the freshmen, new kids, like if you have not experienced that level of joy winning a championship, or the fun that is of winning,
mm-hmm,
it's hard to say, to have a vision around that. So you've got to there's this level of trust that you have to give the coach and the returning players, like, hey, I promise you it's worth it. And
mm-hmm,
when we win the championship, you're gonna feel this joy. And I think for a lot of athletes who, it's boring, it's not very fun, these things, that they really haven't gotten to experience the joy of the top of the mountain, or the winning a tournament, or any of those things. And so,
mm-hmm,
um, trying to get them to understand that feeling, to me, usually, and we trying to draw on that when afterwards as well.
mm-hmm, definitely. Well, listen, we're right at our time, and I said I wanted to be respectful of that, but I do have two questions. First, favorite Star Wars movie?
I'm a Return of the Jedi guy, which is not on most people's top of the list. But for me, I think I was 9 years old when it came out, and that for me, that was the Luke Skywalker wins the whole thing. So for me, to this day, is still very much number one.
Okay. And last question, favorite Elvis song?
Oh man, that's hard. That's a good question. I would say all shook up. But I'll have to say, it'd be hard to choose. I like all of them.
That's awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time today. It was such an easy, fun conversation. Would love to do a part two in the future if you'd be open to that. And I
Absolutely.
hope that everybody watching today gains some value from this interview. I know that I did. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to following you some more and checking out your posts. And again, would love to talk again in the future.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for today. I'll be back on Monday with our next Master Motivation guest. Have a great weekend. And once again, thank you, Matt Lisle.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye bye, guys.